And welcome back to Newsmax Now.
We now want to welcome in Prime host J.D. Hayworth. J.D., always a pleasure to have you here on the show.
It's good to be here with you two. It's marvelous. Thanks.
All right, we want to talk about Ted Cruz because he's now walking back comments that he made weeks ago when he insisted that he would win all 1,237 delegates needed to clinch the GOP nomination outright.
When we get to a contested convention, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to have a ton of delegates. Donald's going to have a ton of delegates. And it's going to be a battle then to see who can earn a majority. And Glenn, in Cleveland, I believe we will have an enormous advantage.
And that was Cruz on the Glenn Beck Show. The Washington Times reports Cruz has proven that he can work the Republican Party rules in his favor, picking up extra delegates at state conventions, including in Louisiana, where Trump won the primary, but Cruz walked away with most of those delegates. Now, the Washington Times also reports that Cruz has also proven that he's great at recruiting double agent delegates, men and women who are bound to Donald Trump but are loyal to Cruz. Under the GOP rules, these people will be able to switch, though, their votes after the first ballot. Tell us how this works, J.D.
Well, it's been a long time. Not even in the contested convention of 1976 with President Gerald Ford and former Governor Ronald Reagan did that fight get past the first ballot. So Ted Cruz believes that Donald Trump will not really be able to achieve his dream of clinching the nomination on the first ballot, and Ted is getting a little insurance ready for the second ballot. Standard operating procedure when you're in a fight, although it hasn't happened in a long time like this in a convention setting, you always go and say, if I can't be your first choice, will you come over to me on the second ballot? It's just as simple as that, and yet it's as complicated because when Cruz very publicly says, you know, I got to back away from the 1237, the first ballot will not be his, so the real onus is on Trump. Can he convince, over and above the delegates he's won on that first ballot, can he find an extra 100 or 150 to come his way? If he gets to 1,100 delegates, can he get enough to get 1237 on the first ballot? That's the fight most people are focusing on as we prepare for Cleveland in July.
Paging little Marco, who has more than 100 delegates. This is where it comes into play. But it varies from state to state, if I'm not mistaken, right, JD? In some places like Florida, as we learned today, they're bound to the state's choice on the first three votes.
Yeah.
But do you think Cruz is intentionally trying to mislead some delegates because it's kind of wide open? They might not know exactly what the rules are, that they would be making promises they can't keep?
I don't know if it's intentional deception. I choose to think that both candidates try to put their best foot forward and make their most sound argument. And Cruz, of course, is trying to say, now look, I'm a solid conservative. It's part of the non-endorsement we heard from Marco Rubio, but the nice sounding things he had to say on Mark Levin TV the other night. If you notice, he didn't formally endorse because it might release his delegates. So a whole lot is going on. There could be some horse trading. It could involve the Veep stakes. You mentioned Marco Rubio. Let's not forget John Kasich with over 100 delegates, the convention in Ohio. And the thing about the vice presidency is this. Nobody says they want it until it's offered. That's what changes things.
Do you think any of these three that are still in the running might go ahead and pick a VP and make it public to try and give them an edge going into the convention, make it appear that as if things might be a little bit more settled than they really are?
Yeah, you know, John, you mentioned that the other week. I would not be surprised, and yet, given the fluid nature of this situation, it's better the Trump scenario we saw the other day where he mentions Marco Rubio and John Kasich and Scott Walker, even though Walker said he laughed at that. The idea is you want to keep people guessing because you want to have those delegates in play, or perhaps to set up something where those delegates can be released to another candidate.
See, the process all sounds much more complicated.
And it's the Wild West. I mean, Trump can pick up these delegates and fly them all over the place in his plane. That's perfectly with the rules, right? If he really wanted to make them happy.
Look, when I was in Congress, Patrick Kennedy and Teddy Kennedy were still having the Kennedy clam bake at the compound there on Martha's Vineyard or in Cape Cod, wherever the heck it was up there. But look, you can do these things in terms of hospitality, saying, look, I want to get to know you. We're going to have this weekend seminar on things I need to do in government. In fact, should Mr. Trump want to, I can envision almost a charm offensive with a nice resort thrown in saying, come down, let's sit and talk. I'm interested in your opinions on these subjects. No, by the way, you can play some golf at Trump National.
Got a few golf courses, right?
It's all legal, too, because it's not quid pro quo. We had a lawyer on last night saying it's all on the up and up.
It's good to be the delegates, right?
Yeah.
JD, always a pleasure to have you on. And what do you have cooking tonight at 8
Well,
o'clock?
tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific. Colorado last weekend, now Chicago. Some reports of some interesting developments, not with the Democrat machine, you'd expect that in Cook County, but now within the Republican Party. Some disputes over committeemen, all sorts of stuff. We'll have it for you tonight at 8 o'clock.
Something in the
All right.
river there in
Look
Chicago.
forward to it.
Doesn't flow the right direction.
Thanks, JD. Coming up next, we want to hear from you. Tell us what you think about Donald Trump running as a third-party candidate. Should he lose a GOP nomination? You can tweet us your thoughts or leave us a comment on our Facebook page. We'll air some of your comments later on in the show. We'll be right back.